Hey, folks, welcome back to the Mac and Mike Show. I'm Mac and he is Mike, and we're doing this remotely today because I have a little bit of a family issue that I have to take care of. What we're going to talk about today is, Mike and I usually get together and we hang out together. We talk about topics of the day and all those kinds of things, but this is more of an evergreen topic. This is one of those topics that I mentioned to Mike a few days ago, and it became apparent to me through some additional responsibilities I recently took on. And, you know, I guess to encapsulate it, there's a song, I think it's a Bob Seger song, and the line in the song goes, I'm surrounded by people I thought were my friends. And I remarked to Mike that so much of our life is kind of influenced by what people say, do, and think around us. And, given a set of circumstances, we think certain people are our friends. And then we come to find out that they're not our friends at all. But in reality, maybe they thought we were different people, or maybe they think differently about us when they find out something new about us. They act friendly, but then behind your back or to other people, they say things that are not friendly at all. And I remarked that to Mike, and Mike said, yeah, that he had had those same kind of circumstances. And I don't want to embarrass Mike, but I referenced to him some things that he has done in the past that were very, very kind, very, very charitable, and not many people know that he did them. And in doing those things, he did things for individuals or small groups of people that would be the kinds of things that you would read about in the Bible, that where Christ would say, whatever you do for these, the least, that you do for me. And, Mike would go around doing these things, yet the congregation, that is the group of people that attended the same building that we would call a church, were not necessarily as kind to him when he did those things. I had circumstances recently where I took on additional responsibilities, and what I found was people that I thought were my friends, that people I thought that were absolutely 100% behind me and with me. And, I said some things that I honestly, truly believed in, and they criticized me for. And they spoke about me behind my back, not to my face. Not a single one of them spoke about the kinds of issues they had with my stance to my face, but only behind my back. And I did this podcast where people I thought were my friends, spoke very, very rudely and very, very disdainfully about me and about what I've said. And look, I'm old enough to know those kinds of things go on, and they've gone on in the past. I'm not naive. This is not the first time it's happened to me. I guess it happens frequently enough that I thought it was worth talking about. And I think what's most importantly is how we react to it. I'll quit talking for a moment and give Mike an opportunity to add some color of his own to this topic, but we'll come back to how do we handle this and what do we do about it.
Oh, my turn.
Yeah, your turn, buddy.
Oh,
Turn it over to Mike to add some color.
okay. I thought that was coming in a minute, but well, yeah. There's like you said the other day, people don't know us as well as you might think they know us, and then there are people who, like I mentioned, a certain relative who probably struggles because I'm helping them, but politically we're very different. So how that person understands me, I don't know. I can get along with somebody. I can delineate between personal and professional, and I can deal with differences. And I think that's a skill set that we're losing. What do you think about the loss of that skill set to be in a disagreement but still be friends?
Mike, that's interesting because I think, there is a way to disagree without being disagreeable. And if you go back to the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, which was a very popular book probably 40 years ago, um, our society has become much more coarse and much more vulgar and much more what's the word I'm looking for? We don't look for social graces anymore. We've seemed to have lost that in our society, that ability to disagree with someone and say it in a way that is not an offending or an over the top way. You know what I mean? For example, people that know you as Mike, they see the kind things that you do on a regular basis, both for your family and friends. And, I don't want to tell your whole story if you don't want to tell it, but, you've basically taken responsibility um, for a family that is not biologically your family. And I think that's very noble. I think that marks you as being a special man among men. Not every man would do that. And, obviously you do that whenever you are with the woman who is their biological mother, but that's not the case with you. She has passed some years ago. And yet, because of that familial tie, you continue to act as a father figure to so many of these children, to your former wife. And knowing you, I'm not surprised about that, Mike, because that's who you are at your core. And I don't know if that's driven by your faith or whether that's driven just by the fact that you're a good man, a good person. But if people know that about you, they will think one way about you. But certain people, once they know that you're affiliated with Veterans for Trump, all of a sudden that turns a switch, and all of a sudden you're no longer a good person. And I don't know how that can happen. I don't know. What is that they say? The old joke years ago that you can collect all the attaboys that if possible, but one off shit wipes out all the attaboys.
Yeah.
Is that really possible? you know, it, can we compartmentalize different parts of our lives, and can we be friends based upon certain things that we agree upon? Can we admire people for some things that they do, even if we don't like the whole person?
Yeah, that's a good question. Like I said, I always go back to my former military boss. I did not like him professionally, but I liked him personally. And people still do not quite understand that. I should say I didn't respect him professionally because he didn't act in accordance with military protocol for the rank that he held. He did not participate in unit functions like dining outs and retirements. When it came to war, he would never volunteer to go. He was forced to go once at the end. And in order to achieve a higher level and even the enlisted ranks, you have to participate. Um, and he just wasn't even participating much in routine functions that wouldn't interfere with his time off duty. But then when it came to the professional thing, he would misunderstand. His education level didn't seem to be very good, or at least his comprehension level. But he was a really nice guy. I mean, you could sit down and have a cup of coffee with him, smoke a cigarette, talk about family, God, and country issues, and get along just fine. And I find this is the same with Democrats that I deal with, like my neighbor. She doesn't see things, she's a flaming leftist, but she still knows I would do anything for her and her husband. And honestly, Mac, I think they would do anything for me. I don't know if you have relations like that or not. Do you?
Most of those people that I can count on would be family members. I have a few relationships. Mike, because of the many things I'm involved with, I have thousands of acquaintances.
Mm.
Okay. As a matter of fact, it's awkward sometimes. People come up to me and say, "Oh, I know you. You're so and so from such and such. You motivated me to get involved with this organization. I was so interested in you." And I don't even remember their name. And obviously, that's character limitation or flaw on my part. But because I'm involved with so many things, I have these many, many, many what I'll call acquaintances, but I have a few friends. I can count on one hand probably the number of people that I can trust that would be there for me if I need them. And I think that's the kind of thing you're talking about, right?
Yeah, I mean, I have a certain number of friends that they would probably drop everything and come help me if I needed it. Um,
I would.
oh, I know you would, and I'm some of my friends are far away, so I
Hmm.
wouldn't expect them to. But it's really, like I said, the difference there is somebody like my neighbor who really, really must despise me for supporting Trump policies. But yet, if her husband fell and she needed help, she would come get me. And
Right.
she knows I would be there.
Yep.
Um, and so I think it's important for us to set the example. Um, we can't complain about people that treat us badly and treat others badly.
Right.
But I think social media has a lot to do with this. Uh,
That's true. It's a lot easier to be rude and disagreeable when you're in a different building, a different room, miles away. One of the characteristics of my life is that I'm 6'3" and I'm a pretty big man totally. So I don't have a lot of people getting in my face or disagreeing with me in person because I tend to be a little bit imposing. I think I'm not that way at all, but I think some people interpret it that way. Um, and I can be loud. That's part of the reason I'm loud is because my hearing is affected by my military service. So I think I talk louder to compensate for the fact that I don't hear well. But people don't know that about me, and they take that loudness, especially when I'm passionate about a certain idea or a certain whatever it is I'm saying. I can be very loud and imposing, and I'm really pretty easygoing most times. I don't like to be poked or lied about. I don't like people to say things that I didn't say, indicating that I may have said them. But I don't get angry. I just try to set the record straight. And sometimes when I do that loudly and forcefully. And of course, that rubs people the wrong way. So, yeah, I think it's an individual thing, Mike. I really do. But I think the shock comes to me when there are people that I truly consider to be friends. I mean, when they see me, they shake my hand and they give me a hug and they say, "Hey, Mac," or "Hey, Al, it's really good to see you. We missed you. We're glad you're here." That kind of thing. And then I read comments on a podcast that I've done that said, "Oh, this guy's a jerk. He won't do anything except what's good for him." And that's not how I behave at all. You know,
wow.
I took an oath, Mike. We both did. We took an oath when we joined the military, and that oath is really kind of drilled into you. That's an obligation. That's not something you can take lightly. Well, I took an oath to serve in this new area of responsibility as well. And all I'm trying to do is to understand the questions and make sure I'm making the right decision, not the expedient decision, not the popular decision, not the decision that the mob wants. When I say the mob, I'm really talking about those people that are involved in the democracy. There's many people that are loud about what they want and what they would like to see, and that's not. If we had mob rule, we would never have ended slavery, right? I mean, if we had mob rule, there's a lot of things that were very popular back in the day that we would still have with us. But fortunately, we had wise people who were part of the representative republic who did the right thing, not the popular thing. Isn't that more important, Mike, to do the right thing, not necessarily the expedient or the mob thing?
Yeah, absolutely. And knowing you as I do, I find it shocking that people would say anything derogatory or something like you're self-serving. You're actually the opposite. You're
Thank
a giver. Not only do you care for your family, but you stepped into this position first. You were asked to step into the position. You didn't seek it.
you.
And
Yeah.
so you're serving your community as basically a volunteer. And
Yep.
then they ask you to run. So you did, and you have a lot of things on your plate that the average guy would have said, "No, I think I'll give this a pass." But
Yeah.
the servant heart in you said, "If not me, who?"
Yeah. Well, you nailed that one, Mike, and thank you for saying that. But how is that different that what you did when you saw the individual in your church community who needed a vehicle, and you tried to get a group of people together to help get this person a what basically amounts to a disabled capable van or car or vehicle, and you had all these promises from all these people, and it ended up you had to do it on your own. You bought it and provided it basically at your own dollar, and that's a servant heart too, Mike. And not many people know that about you, but doesn't that behavior set you? Because a lot of people, once involved with this group who failed to come up with the resources needed to help this poor individual, a lot of people would just throw their hands up and said, "Okay, well, I can't do it because I'm not getting the help that I was promised." And I don't want to give many details because it's not right to talk about somebody else's personal, private circumstance, and maybe you don't want to talk about the story, but that was one of the things that we talked about that I recognized in you. You know, we we talk about love sometimes, right? And
Mhm.
where does love come from? And you first said to me the most appropriate perspective on love. Love is not something that is generated by humans. Love is generated by our God, and it's His love reflected through us.
Amen.
That's what, and prior to you saying those words out loud, that wasn't something that I spent a lot of time with. But since you educated me on that particular subject, I've said that to many people many times in many circumstances, and because I believe it's true. Um, again, we don't. I don't like to get all gospelly or religious on people that are joining the Mac and Mike show for a perspective of two vets. But in the gospel, John himself, one of the disciples, said, "God is love." And you and I have talked about that many times. I struggle with that. Nine letters of the English alphabet, three words, complete sentence. God is love, and then I challenge you to explain it because it's a conundrum wrapped up in an enigma. Everybody knows what love is, and God isn't love, is He? But the Bible says so, and John says so. John knew Jesus, so I don't know, Mike, but very appropriate words that you educated, that you first taught me or told me, and that I've used many times. And I think at the root of all good things that we do is that love, and that love is not ours. It doesn't come from us.
Yeah, and we've talked about the definitions of love. And one of the definitions that I liked was caring for the other person's needs above your own. So, that's the kind of thing that you do. You care for other people's needs above your own. And I'm sure I do to a degree. But we have to be careful because if we don't, as you've often pointed out to me, take care of ourselves, then there's no way to give anything we
Right.
don't. And I think a lot of people fall into that. So, I try not to judge when people don't help or can't help, or maybe they start out with good intention and then they fail because we don't know what's going on in the other person's life.
Right.
It's the same about making judgments and evaluations about people. The Bible also says no man knows the mind of another. And as you said, not to get all biblical or Christian on people, but these are philosophical truths. They're not necessarily confined to the Christian faith. Even a good moral society will agree with these principles. But do we live in a good moral society anymore?
No, we don't, Mike. That's the truth. We don't. That's the problem, isn't it?
Yep. If you're looking for the timer on the computer, it's down to 4 minutes.
Yeah, I was somehow my computer messed up, and I'm not entirely certain what's going on. But at any rate, no, I wasn't looking for the timer.
I
So,
see. I see you fine.
anyways, Mike, the whole story here is that where we're at with our society today, when you look at the riots that are currently going on in LA, what are they rioting about? They're rioting, or they claim they're rioting about the fact that ICE came into their neighborhoods and arrested people who were here illegally, or they arrested people who helped people avoid the law. I recall them saying about one particular individual who provided false Social Security numbers to people so he could get jobs, and they arrested that guy. Those are the kinds of things that I think we need to understand the motivation for. When people show up on the streets and they take a 5 gallon can of gas and they pour it on the engine compartment and all over the police car, how is that activity related to, I don't like what the ICE did to to my friend or to my neighbor or to the person who lives down the street from me that I know to be a good person, but they were rounded up in this ICE raid. You know, if they broke the law coming here illegally, isn't that enough to get arrested for? And in the civilized society, shouldn't people accept that? And what is it that allows people in a civilized society to ignore those rules? I get a kick out of, if you remember when I think it was CNN, but it might have been one of the other, it might have been MSNBC, where the correspondent standing in front of the burning community and said, these are mostly peaceful protests. The other one I loved is the guy got on, talking about LA, he got on the TV and he says, hey, 99% of LA is completely safe and no problems whatsoever. Well, yeah, but what about the 1%?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that worthy of conversation? Is that worthy of communication? Is that worthy of talking about? I don't know the answer to that. So anyway.
Yeah, we're down to about a minute and 20.
Well, let's wrap it up then, Mike. I'm sorry we had the interruption before. I think people ought to consider, um, what the problem is with our society, that we've allowed our society to become the unfriendly, disagreeably, instead of being instead of disagreeing without being disagreeable. And my belief is that our society, if we're going to, and this is not a Christian or not a biblical issue. This is more just you know good society.
Yeah.
We must treat each other with respect. We have to find our way back to that point where, if we disagree, let's talk about it. Well, let's not just go into the shadows and scream and complain and whine and moan and call each other names. That doesn't help. That's not productive. Agreed?
Agreed.
All right. With that, should we say Mac and Mike
Out.
out?